Hello, and welcome back to the Sounds Like Freedom podcast. I'm your host, Deborah Henne. I'm here live with Kelly Dupée, who is a husband, a dad, a grandpa, pastor, police chaplain, marriage coach, and author. But most importantly, he's a follower of Jesus Christ. He's been married to his wife, Carrie, for over 35 years, and they've been blessed with a son, daughter, son in law, daughter in law, and three grandkids. He's a dedicated pillar of faith church in Glendora, California, where he's faithfully served as one of the pastors for over 35 years. But his commitment to his community doesn't stop there. For more than a decade, he's also been the trusted chaplain for the West Covina Police Department in West Covina, California. But his mission extends beyond the local church and the police department service. He's embarked on an inspiring journey with the creation of Turn It Up Marriage Coaching, a dynamic ministry designed to empower couples to forge unbreakable bonds. This ministry offers valuable resources and coaching to help couples not just mend, but truly flourish in their marriages. In 2021, he achieved a huge milestone in publishing his book, Turn It Up: How to Have the Lifelong Marriage That You Really Want. And what fuels his unwavering passion is it's deeply rooted in his personal journey. He knows firsthand the agony of a marriage in turmoil and the heartbreak of divorce in a family. His calling is to help couples and individuals acquire and apply transformative skills that steer their lives and marriages to a brighter future. Welcome, Kelly.
Well, thank you, Debbie. It's great to be here with you.
Yes, thank you so much for being with us. Now, you talk a little bit about your story in your bio, talking about going through a heartbreaking turmoil in marriage, finding healing, finding restoration. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I'm sure that's a big part of your journey to decide to be a marriage coach and to help other couples.
Yeah. When my son came to me, it came to us, my wife and I, gosh, close to 10 years ago now, and said, "Hey, I want to get married." So the very next day, in a time of prayer, just asking God, what can I do to kind of, prepare my son for being married? And at that time, we'd been married maybe, 25, 26 years, something like that. Everything was going really good. And so I really got the idea to just write down all my fatherly advice. Well, that's what eventually became the book. And I was able to finish it in time, or at least finish enough of it that I got him a rough draft of it before the wedding, as I had hoped, or soon thereafter, I think. And then it just kind of sat in my computer. So this is the story of the book, but it's also our story. And then, then some challenges hit. Uh, so my wife and I actually close to our 30-year anniversary, like maybe year 28, 29, we went through the roughest patch that we've ever experienced as a couple. I mean, you talk about sometimes people say to me, well, we're just not reading from the same page. It felt like my wife and I weren't even reading from the same book. It was so bad. And it was absolutely, just terrified, because I just knew that if things didn't change, that if God didn't intervene, if something didn't, work, then I didn't know where we were going to be. And there's nothing like standing on the edge of a disaster to cause you to look inside and say, okay, what isn't working? What do I need to do differently? Lord, show me, guide me. And so I began a journey, which then eventually led to the marriage coaching and what I'm doing now. Because at that point in time, one of the big errors that I was making is that I kept praying and asking God to change my wife. I kept asking him, and this is all, my whole book had already been written. And, I did go back and add a little bit of this and a few of the lessons, but by and large, it's like, hey, how can you possibly teach others about being married when your life is and your marriage is in such a shambles? And that was because, like I said, I was asking God to change my wife. Things really changed when I started praying, God, change me. Lord, show me what I need to do. How can I be the husband that my wife needs me to be? What am I doing that's not working, that's not meeting her needs, that's not meeting her where she's at? Why do we have such a difficult time agreeing about things? What's going wrong? And so God really began to show me some things about learning to listen and understand. And it is things that were in the book. You know, I kind of understood it conceptually. I'd experienced it somewhat prior to this, but now it was like, okay, this is crisis time. You really got to put into practice what you've been teaching or what you want to try to tell others. And God began to turn things around. You know, like you said in the bio, actually, just a couple of weeks ago in September, we celebrated 36 years of being married. And so, you know, we made it through. We learned some lessons, and so out of that, and really just, you know, putting God first. I mean, we were both committed to the Lord and both committed to each other, but things were just not working, and now they are. And so, because of that, you know, that's really what the Lord showed us. And so, out of that came then a heart to then go into this in a much bigger way to help couples. I mean, I've done marriage things over the years as a pastor at our church. I'd led different, you know, programs and classes, and there was even we got a federal grant one time to do marriage enrichment training in our community, and so I was leading that and helping, you know, teach that and going through all the material. But it's different when you have to apply it to your own situation, when you have to grow. So yeah, that's part of the story.
That's awesome. And I want to just kind of pick out a couple things that I heard you say. And one was that you say, you know, this was originally a compilation of my fatherly advice to my son of how to be successfully married. And I think sometimes, you know, as couples are engaged, you're in that euphoric moment and you're in the hustle and bustle of the wedding planning. But the really hard work in the marriage, I think, comes a few months after the marriage. And you're like, oh, okay, this is real life here. And sometimes I think um, we spend so much time in like the premarital counseling. I almost have been thinking that it would be helpful to have a 1 year post-marital counseling to equip new couples on how to set those strong foundations and realistic expectations. I think, and it sounds like you've experienced this. My husband and I, we've been married about 20 years now, so we haven't hit that 28-year mark yet. But it seems, as I've talked to friends of mine, and you know, we all kind of got married in the same few years, that there are cycles in marriage. That there's really, really, really good times, and then there's a little bit of a rough patch, and it's almost like a growing deeper together as you learn to dig in together to achieve that deeper level of harmony and intimacy and faith together. But it's not always fun or easy to go through, but you need those skills and you need maybe somebody who's written a book or somebody who can kind of put skin on how to get through that together. So I love that you took that and you said, you know what, I'm gonna take what I do, what I know, and share with my son how to equip him to be married, and then share that with more people. I love it. Um, but yeah, and another thing that really stuck out to me was that, you know, you wrote this book, you wrote this fatherly advice, and then you got attacked right in that area. How many times does that happen in our lives? You know?
And you know, the thing, Debbie, is that you know, God allows tests and trials to come into our life. I don't believe that He causes them, but He lets them come in because He wants us to grow. And especially when we have a heart and a desire to do something for the Lord to help other people. As I look back on it now, certainly what we went through wasn't fun. I'd never want to go through that again, and I don't think it'll ever happen again. But um, it God used it. And now, as I'm meeting with couples, I mean, I'm reflecting back on here's the things I learned. This is what I had to do. And I ask couples, what do you want? And they always say, well, we want to communicate better. Okay, well, let me tell you what I learned when my wife and I went through this, So I mean, God is using that story, to be a blessing. But yeah, we are tested. Do you really want to do this? Is this something that you really want to, pursue? And if you are, then chances are, yeah, you're going to have to, maybe go through some tests or trials in that specific area. So as I look back on it now, it's like, oh, okay, well, maybe I should have picked something different. But I'm really glad the Lord led us this way, and I'm certainly glad that we got through it. So
So when you have a couple that comes to you, because I think that communication and decision making in particular is such a big point of contention and friction in marriage. And this was kind of something that, when my husband and I went through some rough patches, and I thought, why am I struggling so much with this person that I love so much and that I've committed my life to? But I have all these friends that I've had my whole life, and I don't have these problems, you know? and and I thought, I think a lot of it boils down to I don't make those day-to-day life decisions with my friends like I do with my spouse. And
exactly right.
life-changing decisions, and we don't always share the same opinion or perspective. Often we don't because we're opposites. So that's part of how it works. So what do you tell couples when they come to you and say, we're having a big communication breakdown. We cannot make these decisions together that is satisfactory for both of us.
Oh, great question. So, it is a process, but process begins with first listening to understand and not listening to reply. So, this is what I find is one of the biggest mistakes that couples make, or people make. We all do this, whether it's at work or with our friends or anyone else. We listen to reply. So, what does that mean? So, yes, I'm listening to you speak to me, but I'm thinking about what am I going to say when you stop talking, right? We all
Huh?
do that. It's human nature. The problem, though, is that when it's a very difficult topic or a touchy subject or a painful subject, because there's a lot of emotion involved in it, you end up not feeling understood. And so, like, for example, have you ever been in a conversation where maybe it's your husband or maybe somebody else, they just keep repeating themselves, right?
Hmm.
Well, why do we feel the need to repeat ourselves? Is because we don't feel the other person understands. So first step is, okay, let's look at our listening, and let me give you some tips and tell you how to start understanding each other and showing that you do. The next thing then that I encourage him to do is, really try to see the issue or the challenge from your spouse's perspective. So, in order to come to an agreement or to compromise, which is really where we're going with this, you first have to understand what are the concerns and issues and struggles or fears or whatever thoughts, opinions that you have about this questions. So, I'm not able to offer a compromise that's going to meet your need until I first understand what your need is. See how that works? And so once we kind of, start seeing it from the other person's perspective, then it's like, okay, now I understand, where you're coming from. So what if and then you can go, once you do that. And by the way, when that happens in a conversation, then both people start feeling better about each other. Instead of the fear, instead of the animosity or the hostility that might be there because you don't get it, you don't understand, and I'm mad at you. All of that fades away when we reach that place of understanding. And then because the hostility's gone, then it's like, okay, well, let's kind of brainstorm. And you know what brainstorming is? You just write out every stinking idea you can think of, put it on post-it notes and pin it to your wall. And then you take down the ones that are stupid, but then maybe you find one or two that might be the answer. So that's one of the techniques that I use. And I love teaching couples skills. And I agree with you. The key to learning how to be successfully married, or to being successfully married, is learning how.
Hmm. Absolutely, because it doesn't just happen. It,
Exactly.
love
Yeah,
people just don't just happen. They're made. And it's a
exactly.
couple that dug deep together to go deep together in the
Hmm.
Lord. Yeah. Awesome. So the other thing I really heard in your story was that you said that you kept praying that God would change your wife. And then the change actually started when you looked at how God could change you. And I had a very similar experience um, where, you pray those angry prayers because you're angry with your spouse, something happened or whatever. You can't see eye to eye, not even close. And I'm like, God, you need to change him because I know everything and I'm right, right? you know, and what God took me through. This is probably about year 10, 11 in our marriage, and He said, "Well, how about you do this to bless him?" And I was like, "Really?" I was like, "Don't you
Hmm.
see how he needs to change?"
Mm.
And what happened was I changed. And as I continued to just bless and release blessing over him, our whole relationship changed. And God used that to bring us into a healthy place. But I had to change first. And I
Mm.
think that's
Exactly.
thing in marriages. We're always looking, so many times we look for the other person to change, but we don't look at ourselves and see, well, what can I do to bless this marriage and to invest in this marriage, and what heart work needs to happen in my life, even if they are behaving badly, even if they're being very human, because we're all people, we make mistakes. How can their areas that need growth and change cause a greater level of holiness and graciousness in me first? Because I can't,
Absolutely.
because ultimately I can't change the other person. God has to change the other person.
Exactly
He
right.
cannot change me.
Hmm.
Um, so I also found that that was a huge pivotal shift in our marriage
Hmm.
when I got that concept and God taught me and then had me live it. Because I think sometimes you have to live it to learn it, especially when it comes to marriage and relationships.
Exactly right. Yeah. One of the sayings that I learned from my pastor, and I've been at the same church for 35 years, and one of the sayings that he drilled into all of us in the congregation, and obviously I help other people with this, but that he says that the problem often, your problem often is not the problem. It's how you see the problem is the
Mm-hmm.
problem. And there's a lot of wisdom into that. So what was going on, if I may, is that your problem, the way you saw the problem, is that my husband's wrong and I'm right, which, by the way, is a problem because I think
Mm-hmm.
we need to let
Yeah.
go of our opinion and our perspective. A little exercise that I do sometimes with couples is that I'll have them, if I'm in person with them, or even if we're just over the phone or in Zoom, I'll just have them picture this, is that if you're facing each other and one of you is holding a white styrofoam cup, and on one side of the cup is a red X, but you're facing each other. The cup is in the middle. One person's going to see the X, the other person is not. And it's all the perspective that you're looking at. And so it's very easy to misunderstand what your spouse is seeing because you don't see it the same way. So then, as they realize that, you know what, yeah, I don't see that red X, and there's nothing you can do to convince me that it's there, well, then you have that person come around, stand up and move around and stand behind his wife, and she's still holding the cup. And then he sees the X and he goes, "Oh, now I see it." Why? Because he's looking at it from her perspective, or vice versa. So, seeing the problem from the other person's perspective. And don't get me wrong, there are some areas in life that are absolute, but a lot of things in life, it really boils down to the way you see it. And so when you started giving thanks, to God for your husband, when you started choosing to bless him, what were you doing? You were changing the way you looked at the problem. You were looking at it from a perspective of, this is my husband, this is my ally, not my enemy. And how can I get on the same page with him, instead of how can I prove that he's wrong and that I'm right? That was the huge change for me. I had to give up, you know what, I'm right, and there is only one way out of this problem. And I had to start seeing it from my wife perspective, because when we did, then it was like, okay, let's stop fighting about this. Let's start working together. And we did. And we came up with a solution, and, we moved forward with implementing that. So yeah, good stuff.
Absolutely. And I would even venture to say that if somebody is praying a prayer like that, saying you need to change that person, that's
Hmm.
probably really the heart issue. Just what you said right there, that
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm right. And even if it's not a conscious thought, because it wasn't a conscious thought for me at
Hmm.
the time, all I could see, like you said, was my perspective, but my perspective was right. And you're absolutely right that God had to pull me out of that and say, nope, nope.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so that's just kind of a little challenge,
Hmm.
reflective challenge to say, if somebody's listening and they are praying that prayer, to go before the Lord and, just lay your soul bare and listen
Absolutely.
and say, okay, God, give me your perspective on this
Hmm.
situation and what kind of heart work can you do in my life to make
Yeah,
work.
absolutely. Yeah. And it's giving up, recognizing the arrogance and the pride. And I didn't see it at the time, just like you said. I laugh about it now, when I am teaching in a group of people, and I say, here's what I was doing. I laugh at how
Mhm.
foolish I was, how arrogant, but I couldn't see it at the time because I was too invested in that perspective, in that opinion. And so we need to kind of let go and hold our opinions loosely. But you're
Mhm.
absolutely right. It starts with a prayer to the Lord. God, show me your perspective, because I may be wrong. And that's, of course, humility. When we come saying, I'm right, I know what to do, I mean, that's just reeks of pride and self sufficiency. I don't need God. I don't need you. I know what the right thing to do is. And of course, the Bible tells us that pride comes before a fall, because when we're locked into that, opinion or that point of view, and we're not open to the opinions of others, that's where we make huge mistakes in our lives. And God's trying to guide us differently, but we're not listening. Why? Because we think that He doesn't know what He's doing, and we do, right?
Right, 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 right. And when you like pull the emotions out of it and you look at it more objectively and say, okay, what is this really saying about where my headspace is right now? And you put it in those
Exactly.
words, you can see how ludicrous it is. And you're like, wow.
And
Like,
and sometimes that is kind of what happens in a coaching conversation, because I'm kind of that uninterested, neutral third party, and this couple's kind of going at each other and presenting their perspectives, and I'll just kind of gently say, well, that certainly is a valid perspective. It has a lot of good points to it, but what about this? And then I'll kind of poke some holes in it. What about looking at it from this perspective? Just so that they can kind of drop their defenses a bit and begin to see it from their spouse's perspective. And then usually both of them need to move. Both of them need to let go so that they can find that, third alternative. I like to look at it instead of a win-lose. Let's focus on a win-win agreement or arrangement. And that only comes when we let go of our position and are open to receive and be influenced by the position of our spouse.
absolutely. And sometimes I'm a very visual person. So sometimes I'll visualize like, well, this is what would be right for me, and this is what would be right for him. But the marriage is almost like a whole entity in itself.
Oh,
What's
you
right
are
for marriage?
exactly. Yeah. And I think that's another big mistake that couples make, is that we think in terms of me and not we. We don't consider what's best for us. So, in order to get to us, we got to let go of me and my perspective, and I'm right, and all of those first person pronouns, and start focusing on what are they, second person. I guess I'm not an English guy. I speak English, but you know what I mean. I
Mhm.
think they're called second person pronouns, where the you and us and that kind of stuff. And then third is they, right? If I'm remembering, my a third person pronoun would be they
Yes,
and
the third
them.
person.
So
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
the
they,
second.
them, and then the second person is you, and then the first person is I, and but it's like a first person plural would be like the we.
Oh, there you go. Okay. Thank you for the English lesson.
It's okay. I do it with my kids. My kids are in school.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, my kids are my grandkids are not at that stage yet, so I
Yeah,
haven't reviewed any of this in a
been a
long
while.
time.
Yep, I get
Yes,
it.
we need to think in terms of plurality and not singular because it's no longer you. If you're married, it's all I mean, my favorite marriage verse, which by the way is in the Bible 5 times, goes like this. It's Genesis 2:24. For this reason, a man would leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. That's what God's plan is. That's our goal. That's the reason. That's the vision, if you will, of what marriage should be all about, becoming one and then living out that oneness. But it starts with our words that we use. Stop using the word I and start using the word we and start thinking in terms of us and we and that plural kind of thing. Very good.
Absolutely. Very encouraging, very wonderful. I have a copy of your book here,
Yay.
which is available on, where can they find this book?
Hey, if you, I have it available at a 75% discount at a special website. So just type in the word turnitup.coach/75. If you type that in, all one word, then it will, yeah, you got turnitup.coach. That takes you to my website, and I'll tell you more about that. But then put a /75. You can get it for $3.99 for the digital copy. I'm sorry, $3.75 for digital, and then $4.99 for the paperback. And it's U.S. orders only. I don't do international shipping, but I'll be glad to mail you a copy or email you one to do that. And if you go to Amazon, you'll find it there. Leave me a review, but don't buy it there because then you'll have to pay full price.
Understand. So you mentioned your website, turnitup.coach. What are some things that people can find on your website?
Oh, thank you. So there on the website, there's a couple of different things. I produce a weekly video on YouTube, and then I put it into a podcast, and it shows up. The most latest video shows up on my website as soon as it goes live on YouTube. So you can see a lot of the different videos that I produced. I think I have like almost 150 of them on YouTube, and they're between maybe 5 and 20 minutes, something like that. They're not super long. The average length is about 8 to 10 minutes. And so these little snippets, little things that you can listen to on your way to work, about how to have a great marriage. So it's called the Turn It Up Marriage Tips and Tools Show. If you wanted to look it up on YouTube or on Apple, because it's on Apple and Spotify. So you can see that. The other thing, though, that I really want to highlight at the website is that there's a button on there. It says book a discovery call. So a discovery call is basically an opportunity to meet with me. It's absolutely free. It's 60 minutes, and it's a conversation just to look at what's going on, and then where do you want to be, and how do you get there in your marriage. And if you're single and are struggling with that, be glad to help you, find that. Or if you're in a relationship and it's not working, or certainly if you and your spouse can get on the call together with me, we'll make some real progress. And I promise you that you'll end up with a call with at least 3 action steps of things that you can do to strengthen your marriage or relationship. So yeah, check that out. You can read a lot more about me and see some of the blogs. I don't really do a lot in writing. I do mostly in video, but you can also then read about the book and some of the reviews. And anyways, then book a call. Be glad to offer that to all of your listeners.
Sounds awesome and great resources. Thank you so much for sharing some bits of wisdom today to help us learn how to live in God's freedom in our marriages. And go to his website, turnitup.coach, and check out his book, check out his discovery call, and let's not forget to tune into our thoughts to make sure they sound like Jesus's, so they sound like freedom. And don't forget to swipe, tap, or click over to deborahhenne.com. Follow me on social, on Instagram, the X, or Facebook at Deborah Henne Author, and be blessed.